Happy New Year, everybody. It's Logan Albright here, back with the first book review of 2020. I hope you guys are excited for a good upcoming year and a good upcoming decade indeed. Today I want to talk about this book called Là-Bas, or Down There, by J.K. Huysmans, I think. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that. It's French. This is a book that came out in 1891, originally in French. It's been translated into English, obviously, and it's a really interesting read. It's sort of in the Gothic novel tradition. It reminds me stylistically of Oscar Wilde. There's a lot of kind of very intellectual conversations between the main characters that go on, and it deals with a lot of themes that I'm interested in. It deals with the materialism and scientism of the age in which it was written. It deals with occultism. It deals with Satanism. It deals with history, the Middle Ages. It deals with religion. Basically, the plot is pretty thin, but it's about a man named Durtal who is sort of an eccentric, and he longs for the Middle Ages. He's nostalgic. He doesn't like the modern world, and he hangs out with this small circle of friends who are the same way he is. There's an astrologer. There's a church bell ringer who's a Catholic, and they kind of hang out together and reminisce about the old world and say how terrible the modern world is. And he's engaged in writing a biography of a medieval character called Gilles de Rais, or Bluebeard, who was a famous, infamous murderer, child molester, Satanist, horrible, all-around horrible guy. And he's working on this biography, and he's kind of longing aloud to his friends, and he's saying, "Oh, if only there were people like this, like these Satanists around today that I could study to help me understand what was going on in that time period. I could write my biography more effectively." And his friends say, actually, there are people like that in the modern age. You just need to know how to find them. And so naturally he does. And he takes up a dalliance with a married woman, and he ends up finding his way into a Satanist society. And the whole thing culminates in a description of a black mass, which is pretty well described, a pretty sensational passage in the book. Now, of course, the black mass is largely fictional. It's something that practitioners of witchcraft and pagan religions were accused of doing. As far as I can tell, it was made up by the church and not actually practiced that way, but it's something that's used as a way of demonizing those people and making them seem like they're very anti-Christian and doing horrible, blasphemous things. In fact, it's only ever been done, to my knowledge, as by kind of modern groups that are intending to shock people. To do it for shock value, not for any religious or legitimate worship purposes. But it's certainly an effective device in literature and fiction, and it's very well portrayed here. It's a pretty thrilling read. Like I said, the style reminds me a little bit of Oscar Wilde. It's witty, it's well described, it's a lot of sitting around conversations between these intellectual friends talking about their philosophies, and it's sort of the author working through his own issues. Apparently he was sort of a lapsed Catholic and was coming back into the fold. And there's I think the moral of the story, there's sort of a line at the end of the book where he talks about how a century of materialism and scientism and atheism has managed to snuff out everything except for Satanism, and it's only strengthened Satanism. And so he's talking about how kind of society having turned away from mysticism and religion and theology and all these kind of immaterial things, and focusing purely on rationalism and evidence and science, has ended up losing all the valuable things in life, but has retained a lot of the monstrous things, a lot of the perversions. So the author is kind of coming back into the Christian fold with his description of this black mass and his assessment of the late 19th century and what was going on in society at that time. And the whole book is really a meditation on that, disguised as an adventure story. Not really an adventure story, but it's got adventurous parts in it. There's partly romance, there's partly kind of Gothic horror. It's a little bit reminiscent of something like The Monk, which I've reviewed on this channel. His style also reminds me a little bit of G.K. Chesterton, who I've talked about on this channel, which is probably more of a function of the time period than anything else. Late 19th century, people just wrote like that. But I find it a very engaging style. I find it a very appealing way of writing, and I like a lot of authors from this time period. And I'd heard about this book, but I'd never actually read it, so I picked up a used copy from Dover Publications in a used bookstore somewhere, and it was a good read. I got through it pretty quickly. I enjoyed it. I learned a few things. I would recommend it if you're interested in those type of books. If you like the Gothic literature, Gothic horror, if you're interested in the occult or Satanism or anything like that, it's certainly a enjoyable read. And if you're interested in literature of the late 19th century, it's an enjoyable read. It's not profound. It's not going to be groundbreaking in a way of some books are, but for a couple of cheap thrills, it's not bad. I enjoy it. So So there you have it, my review of Là-Bas, or Down There, by J.K. Huysmans, I think it's pronounced. That's been my review. I've been Logan Albright. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed and would like to see more. I'll be putting out more book reviews shortly to come. I have a few that I've finished that I am looking forward to reviewing shortly. So I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.